So just a bit about me and my role. I joined the council about 3.5 years ago. Historically, I'm an architect, but always worked on sustainable buildings, and then joined the public sector, 2.5 years ago through a scheme called Public Practice, which was all about getting private sector input into public sector environments. My role at the moment is it's sort of split into two. It's half Meridian Water Sustainability Lead, and it's half what we're talking about now is half joint interim head of climate action and sustainability for the council. Also, I can flash this up at the end, or I can put it in the chat. That I do have an email address, and you can kind of, I guess what it is. It's rafe.bertram@enfield.gov.uk. But also this one, climate emergency, is a really good email, because that, if I'm not able to sort of get that immediately, then other team members will. So I suppose just a tiny bit of background. I think you all know all of this, but this is a climate commitments that, I mean, it's a funny one, this climate commitments, because we can commit to the first one, which is the council being carbon neutral by 2030. And so that's the council as an organization, like a company, being carbon neutral by a certain date. We can do that. But we've kind of, the other target we have, I'm reluctant to call it a commitment, but the other target we have is the borough to be carbon neutral by 2040. And what that means the emissions in the sort of boundary of Enfield, and there's lots of debate about whether that's production emissions or consumption emissions, but which scope it contains, etc., etc., etc. But the key thing is that, which I'll come on to in a moment, is that we can't do that alone. You know, we can't say to everybody, you must do this and you must travel like that and you must eat that sort of stuff. That's not what the council does. So we have to be very careful with that and reach out and work and influence and help and collaborate and work in partnership with everybody to try and get this moving in the right direction. And it's 2040, which is 10 years ahead of the national 2050 legal net zero target. And it's partly that because I think because we think that the science aligns more with the 2040 than it does with the 2030. So we're doing that, but there are issues that are slightly ahead of the more ambitious than the national targets. And I put that point about the community survey. Thank you everybody for doing that community survey. I think that was absolutely fantastic. Those who did it, I think we got something like about 140 responses from all over the communities. So thank you for that. And that's been informing a lot of what we're doing, and partly informing this discussion now, because one of the takeaways that we got from that is that there's so much interest, there's so much expertise, there's so much activity out there, that what we want to make sure that we're doing is engaging with all of that, is working in partnership with all of that, and coordinating and collaborating with all of that. We've also got, some of you have, I'm sure, picked up on these annual progress and emissions report, and thank you for that very detailed response to these that we've been going through and taking on board. The next one, the next slide is focusing on. I want to focus on this, the carbon neutral borough, and particularly focusing on those scope 1 and 2. So those are the actual direct emissions, whether it's burning fossil fuels themselves or using the electricity that is created through whatever means, and some of it is burning fossil fuels to create carbon dioxide. But it's really interesting that the split, the donut on the top right, is the split of carbon emissions in the borough for those scope 1 and 2. So it's not quite third, but there's the domestic buildings is huge. Commercial, institution, and industrial buildings is huge. So if we just think about buildings themselves, and this is not just kind of heating buildings, putting light on in buildings. This is energy consumed within buildings. So this also includes the powering of the laptop and the computers that you're using to connect here. So it's all of that as well. And the other third, say 40% actually, is about transport, and it's about the transport that happens and originates in the borough. So that's good to, I mean, I find that for this discussion quite helpful. The other graph that is also helpful is this one at the bottom, which is about the tracking of these emissions and how it's changing over time. And we haven't drawn a trajectory to this, but we've got to make sure that, well, sorry, we've all got to work on that trajectory sloping down in 20 years, 18 years, to be much nearer zero than it is right now. And that's really tough, and that's tough for a kind of question and a debate of how we all do that. Now, so I hope that's kind of helpful, and I hope it's not too obvious, and I hope I don't come across as patronizing through that information. The role of the council is this is where this slide I find, and this discussion find really interesting, because huge amount to do. And the Climate Change Commission, for instance, the CCC, which is a sort of extraordinary organization, sorry, the Committee on Climate Change, their prediction, or their estimate, is about 2% of UK's emissions. And let's say for now, let's say that 2% is of UK emissions is, let's say it's relevant to the same in Enfield. So 2% of UK emissions is direct local authority controlled. 33% are influenced by, under the influence of, and then that means whatever it is, 65% is actually sort of not covered by our influence or our direct control, but is possibly covered in some part by the collaboration between all the different groups and activities and people of Enfield. So I think that sort of, that 2%, it means that we cannot do this alone. It would be ridiculous to try and sort of think, okay, well, we're gonna tackle this on our own, and we've got control over 2%. It's not gonna get there. It's not gonna work. And so that's why I think that this kind of spheres of influence, I think, is really interesting, and this is again the Committee of Climate Change, and it's again looking at what are, as a local authority, what are in our spheres of influence, and that those spheres start off very close, which is things that are in our direct control, and then those are more the council emissions that our trajectory is towards the 2030. How we commission and procure services and buildings, for instance, how we place shaping, that's really about how we use the regulation that is within our control, like planning, for instance, is something in our control. Then we get into the influencing, and then we get into, we can showcase stuff, we can lead by example, we can kind of knowledge share, we can do all of these things. But now, as we move out, this is other people doing stuff. This is us helping or maybe facilitating, or just listening to, or being part of other groups' projects. The The partnerships then is a sort of similar, but it's sort of slightly kind of further out, is bringing people together, coordinating, supporting others, having that kind of place to to form partnerships and to collaborate. And then there's the sort of involving, engaging, communicating, possibly monitoring, which is what the slide I showed earlier. And so that is the sort of, but I think why that's interesting is because there's a flip side to this, which is also, let's say a community organization or a business or a school or a religious organization or some other community group, or even some sort of an individual. The flip side of this will be very, very different and will involve us maybe as a partnership or involving us. So I find that really useful to kind of think about through this discussion, and how we work better with organizations, how we have this kind of discussion and help grow organizations that can lead us, can lead this change and actually create actual action there. And the last point, long-term planning is needed, but also coordination is absolutely essential. That we mustn't miss it as an Enfield community, of which the council is a part, that you're all a part, that other organisations are all a part of. That we can't miss anything. We have to sort of focus on all of these things. It's slightly, may not make a huge amount of sense to double up on these things. Well, they're doing that, but they're doing that, but they're not talking to each other. How do we form the right partnerships there, so that coordination. And I think that's kind of, that we think that's essential. And the next slide, this is the last slide of this, is what is how do we do that coordination and collaboration? And what I'd like to sort of focus on in the next piece are these things. So this is what, when we had that conversation with when Francis came to see ourselves with Councillor Ergin Erbel, who's the portfolio holder for this issue in the council. Francis talked about these 4 things: community energy, working with businesses, greening urban spaces, and climate cafes and ongoing engagement. And that's a very kind of very, very useful thing to do, because those are kind of like things that we can develop, things that we collaborate on. There are lots of other issues, I know, that are sort of further away issues that are not ready for it's more kind of campaigning and not ready for that collaboration. But what we thought, we'd just start somewhere. Where to start? Let's start somewhere. Let's start with those issues, and then beyond those issues, there's that overall, discussion that followed on from this, which is, how do you engage? And you guys are amazing at this, engaging people on behavior change. That's maybe a really good thing to discuss. Reaching hard to reach groups, particularly in the east of the borough. I think that's an very interesting one that I'm very happy to talk about, and that ongoing collaborative network for climate action. So what I'm going to do now, if that's all right, I'm going to pause, share, new share, stop sharing. So I'm thinking of stop sharing. And then what I was going to do is just go through, if it's okay, I can pause there if that's helpful. But what I was going to do then is go through some of those issues that are brought up in the last slide. And then maybe we do it one by one, actually. Maybe better to sort of, starting off with community energy in the borough, kind of sort of some ideas there. Obviously, it's a brilliant idea. Obviously, it's not the wonderful thing about it's sort of medium innovative. It's not on its own. There are lots of community energy companies that exist. There's not one in Enfield, Ahmed has done an incredible job of starting it, and it'd be good to hear from Ahmed and I showed Ahmed and Gunnar, invited them to building blocks for one of our. Nice to see you, Gunnar. Took them round the installation of solar panels that we're doing at the moment at Building Blocks, which is a community factory, and if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. Please go and have a look round. But it's a community factory. The tenants are called Building Blocks. The Enfield Council is actually the long-term landlord of it, and through the GLA and that local community energy fund, and through our other fund, which is called the New Development Carbon Compensation Fund, we've funded the installation of these solar panels. And the tenant, it wouldn't happen if the tenant wasn't super keen on doing it, and they're doing it partly from an environmental issue response, but actually probably mainly from an energy saving point of view, and that's fine. That's great. I mean, I'm super happy with climate action happening as a co-benefit of other issues. So that's there. So that's something to talk about. I mean, I don't, following on from this, maybe there's be very happy to take other people round. We've kind of, as part of that project, we've asked, one of the conditions for the funding to Building Blocks was that they facilitated some tours and workshops of this. And so lots of possibilities there. And, what I said about sort of medium innovative is that there's, I know, there are companies, there are organizations, like Power Up North London, Stokey Energy, I know a little bit about, Building Blocks, N10 Energy, I think in Haringey. And so it would be super to have a conversation now, and I can sort of shut up and then go on to the other things, but maybe it's worth having a conversation now about community energy in the borough, how we can work together, how we can help, how you can progress that, etc.
Okay,
Francis,
should we take a question?
Should we pause it and then we can go on to to another issue?
Yeah, because we have to finish this session at about 10 to 8 so that we go to the next item. So, I mean, Ahmed, are you there? Do you want to say anything about community energy? Or Tony, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say anything? Tony Watts?
Yes. Rafe, I enjoyed your slides. Can you tell me, have you got do you know what the proportion of energy consumption is by the domestic dwellings? I mean, for across the borough, or across southern England, where you were, according to your slide, because it seems to me that if we've got to reduce energy consumption, obviously you can do it by switching to electric consumption. But if that's not, what can we really do in terms of own homes dwellings? What sort of proportion can we reduce consumption by?
Okay, and let's take Selena as well, and then take those first two questions. Selena?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Hi. Yes, my question is in relation to Building Blocks being located in the easternmost part of the borough, and we are within stone throw of Building Blocks. And it's quite a puzzle, because most of our residents, I'm speaking as a vice chair of REACT, which is a residents group covering over 3,000 households in Upper Edmonton. Most of our residents do not know about Building Blocks, despite the fact that it's a hidden gem in the area. And we've been trying to engage with the council to raise the profile of building blocks to the awareness of the community, as we don't have the resources to enable that relationship to build beyond what we've done so far. To access building blocks, it's quite a difficult thing by foot or in by other means of transport.
Okay,
so
well,
the responsibility lies on the council trying to ensure that we are able to access what building blocks is able to offer to the community. That's my
okay.
question.
Thanks, Selena. That's great. Okay, Rafe, do you want to take those 2 points up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first point about the sort of the energy, the home energy from Tony. Thank you for that. It's a really good question. I mean, there's a huge amount of information out there. I wouldn't like to kind of say I'm an expert on it. I have, just from a personal point of view, just done a retrofit of and a sort of eco retrofit with solar panels of my own home, but there's a huge amount of discussion out there. There's a huge amount of resources. There are particularly, I think, on the EcoFurb is an organization that helps people do this. There's a local organization called HEAT, HEET, which is actually a kind of Enfield Waltham Forest organization that does that. And on our cost of living pages on the website, there's a massive amount of information out there. But I think the point is, that there are sometimes this is not one of the 4 things that Francis mentioned, but the kind of the community retrofit possibilities are huge. I mean, I came across something in Muswell Hill, which was a sort of Muswell Hill Sustainers, I think they're called, but they did a really interesting kind of open house session of people who knew about this stuff, and then allowed a particular day in September last year, opened homes up, 4 or 5 homes up in the area, and people in the area went and visited and asked exactly those questions to those people. And so that's a kind of like maybe that's something for the a community retrofit kind of hub or group or something that come out of this discussion. I think just directly on the building blocks thing, the issue to do with how much energy, we think it's going to be about 1/3 of their energy. We think that, but that's kind of slightly unusual situation, because they are a kind of factory running machines and ventilation that are actually they're using energy during the daytime, usually when the sun may or may not be out, but they've got a kind of that direct impact on their energy bills, and they're hoping to cut their energy bills by about 1/3, and that those energy bills have recently rocketed. So that's that one, but it's a super big issue. From Selena, I mean, the access to building blocks, I can't, that's an important point, I'm sure, but that's not something that I can kind of help with this afternoon, this evening. But it's a good issue. But if you can get there, they're very open, they're very welcoming, and if particularly there are sort of a group of people from this group that would like to visit it, to look at their PV, to hear how they've done it, it's a sort of similar tour that Gunnar and Ahmed did last week. I'd be very happy to sort of help facilitate that too.
Okay, I mean, it's worth saying, if any of you are interested in community energy, let us know. We're looking, things have developed very fast, and we're looking at working with schools. We've got 5 schools interested in community energy. Ahmed and I are talking to Edmonton schools in May. We've got a meeting coming up looking at hospitals and car parks and having solar energy placed on the roofs of that. And we had a meeting today with Enterprise Enfield talking about community energy, one of the things anyhow, and businesses. So that maybe is a good cue for you to talk about the business part and green energy, Rafe.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, and thanks for those questions. I mean, businesses is this is one of something that Francis picked up on, and I mean, businesses are a huge part of that. You saw that donut pie chart, but also it's not just in the buildings, but it's about the the supply chain of the the buildings that we're commissioning, the services we're commissioning. We want to, as a council, want to commission as much as possible within the local community, in terms of that's a really good thing for social value, for apprentices and jobs, etc., etc., etc. So I think where we and it was very good of Francis to connect us, and we had a meeting this morning with the Despina, who runs Enterprise Enfield, but also runs the North London Business Hub, which overall has about one of them has like 1,500 businesses in their membership, and the other has 5,000 or something like that. So a huge reach, really fantastic. And so the idea of that, and this is an idea that's only about sort of 8 hours old, but the idea of that would be to discuss, to set up a kind of a series, or at least the first green business forum. And that's all about businesses coming together, sharing the barriers to their issues, maybe having some kind of case studies of where people have been able to break through their barriers and actually create a kind of like make sense of it all, and to create some successes and learnings for others. So I suppose the kind of that's very exciting. I don't know whether it's going to be in that session is going to be in June or September or whenever it is, but and we want to make it, we can kind of with EnCaf, we can kind of like direct businesses that may not be on that network to that network, but particularly if there are people on this call who are a part of those, a part of businesses in the borough, not necessarily businesses that are necessarily connected to those two networks that I've suggested. But I don't know if there's a way of kind of like putting you or your businesses in touch with Despina to sort of help that go out there. And I've seen Geraldine Strom's co-op sign behind you. It would be amazing to have the co-op there. I'm assuming that's not just a kind of like fun background you had, but you're from that organization, which would be incredibly important to have as part of that, a part of that discussion. Is that, Francis, is that a good sort of update on that?
Yeah, it is. And Despina actually wanted to come to the meeting this morning, but I thought she was still on holiday. Maybe you are. Yeah, I mean, that's really good. So, I mean, we want to develop, because businesses in all are the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So getting involved with them is really important. The other thing is, when we did our survey in our community hubs, the third biggest concern that people had was the lack of green spaces. But before we go on to that, I see Aurora's got her hand up. Aurora?
Yes. First, a point of clarification, because Rafe, you said that the buildings in Enfield represent 60% of the footprint of carbon emissions, and I don't know. Perhaps I misunderstood.
Yeah, I think from the scope 1 and 2 emissions that we have, that the domestic buildings sorry, I'm just trying to get my little chart up at the same time. Domestic buildings are about 38% of emissions, and commercial, industrial, and I'm getting juggling my screen. Commercial, institutional, industrial buildings are 22. Yes, you're very right to pick up on that. My ad hoc presentational maths was wrong. That's 60%.
60%.
So 60%, but that is generally to do with, just to bear in mind, that is energy, that is carbon emitted because of the energy used within buildings. So that may be, that, as I said, that is not just the heating and lighting, that's all the activities that go on within buildings.
Okay, I'm confused about this, because I'd like to understand whether Enfield is measuring the carbon emissions, that is to say CO2, or is measuring energy, because these are two different things. I'm not a scientist, but I think that they are different things. And I take my when I look at what's happening in Enfield, I like to look at the London atmospheric emissions inventory. I don't know if you have considered, I think it's a very important source of information about all sorts of emissions, but the main emissions would be nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter of the bigger one and the smaller one, 10 and 2.5, and carbon emissions. So when I look at this inventory, I see that the domestic emissions of carbon, CO2, are 20%. Industrial and commercial are 56%, and transport are 25%. So we see that industrial and commercial emissions are, on equal par with transport plus domestic in Enfield. And we have to look at this very, very seriously. I know that it is not in the power of the council to tell businesses what to do and what not to do, but it is in the power of the council to seek some kind of, well, I don't know if it's about power or if it's about some kind of intervention to seek everything possible to address this, because it's more than 50% of CO2 emissions. Okay. So that is a very concerning thing.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, Rafe? Because we've only got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to. I think it's a good point. I mean, there is a distinction between the kind of particulates, the kind of nitrogen, the sort of the nitrogen dioxide, the nitrous oxides, and the particulates. That's a kind of like those aren't classed, I think, as greenhouse gases, but they're incredibly important for air pollution. They're incredibly important for air quality, and they're incredibly important for people's health. They affect people and the planet in different ways. And
sorry to butt in, but I'm referring to CO2,
but just a minute,
not to nitrogen dioxide.
Okay. Well, look. This is send me some stuff and I'll have a look at it. I mean, but these are what we're looking at, and I've just seen Joe Baker pop up on the screen. Very nice to see you, Joe. Joe Baker is kind of one of London's, probably the London guru on all of these issues that are part of this group, and he's incredible. He's a sort of like an inspiration to all of us, to me, and so maybe there's a kind of a discussion you have with Joe about that too within these ongoing groups.
Okay, well, let's make contact between Aurora and Joe, if you don't mind, Joe, and also with Rafe as well, and then we can carry on with that in a different way and in more depth. Dana's, by the way, put up something about the City of London offers breakthrough routes then for SMEs, and that might be useful information for us, Rafe. She's put that in chat. The other thing we were going to talk with, we talked about a lot, and I know that Selena from React and others were really concerned in Eastern Enfield was the lack of green space, and we talked that we would try and do something collaboratively about that. So do you want to mention that, Rafe?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one there are lots of ideas there. It's probably out of the four ones we're talking about is the most is the one that I've probably got sort of less interesting ideas about. There's obviously there's a council manifesto commitment for the street trees. There's lots of friends. I've been amazed about how many incredible friends of parks groups there are, and that whether they're in where you want those parks to be, but that's a kind of a groups that are set up to work with these issues. I think there's also allotments and allotment groups. There's also ideas around how can estate the land, the lawns, also how can the area around housing estates be used more, increased biodiversity. And so it's a good discussion. There's some ideas there, but very happy to kind of like bounce around other ideas there. There's also some of those groups come to our Environment Forum, and there is the Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny Panel, which is an event that's actually open to absolutely everybody. And sometimes we discuss these things and have to there's a good discussion with all different councillors from all over the spectrum, and officers are involved there. So there's an opportunity to think through that as well as this discussion. And the last thing I'd say is that there's lots of sort of voluntary work going on, voluntary groups, particularly with Thames 21, which is a super organization that you may know about. But I mean, I'd be really interested in like brainstorming that, greening urban spaces, because it needs council being involved to an extent, I guess, but it also needs a kind of community body that can actually take a kind of like we want to do this for this area, and so that there's a kind of a collaborative discussion, discussion to have.
Matt Byrne is very concerned about this, and he's got his hands up, and he's from Better Homes. Matt, do you want to speak?
Hang on. Oh, there we go. Sorry, my camera's not working. Good evening. Yes, thank you for this. So, Rafe, I'm not sure if you've seen the proposals for the Banbury Reservoir Park in the southeast of the borough brought forward by CPRE.
I haven't. I haven't. I'm not sure. No, I'd love to see them.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'll be able to send you those. We shared them some time ago with Enfield Council and Waltham Forest.
Yep.
And that's for a 60-hectare park in the southeast of the borough using largely greenbelt land, which is currently underused or poorly used, owned by Enfield Council, Waltham Forest Council, and largely Thames Water. And Waltham Forest reacted very, very well, I have to say. They put it in their local plan. They unlocked a lot of the land, and they saw the ideas that we were coming forward with in terms of improving permeability towards the New Meridian water development. It's a fantastic idea. It's a great opportunity for getting a significant new park down into the southeast of Enfield. But unless we get Enfield Council's support, we can't unlock GLA funding. And we need GLA funding to get the community involved, to build up plans, to take them to the next stage. So Waltham Forest has been really positive, but at the moment we've not had much in the way of conversation. Well, we have had conversations with Enfield Council, but no commitments. So it'd be great if you were able to pick that up with us and CPRE and take a look at them. We just need some positive noises to help us help you and everyone, really.
Okay, so if you could get all that information, which I know you've done and you've sent around that to Rafe, would that be a good start? Then we can begin that conversation with him as well on that. Would that be okay, Rafe?
That'd be good. I'd love to have a look at it. I maybe should have had a look at, or should have seen it, but I'm very happy to take a look at it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rafe.
The other thing is we've set up a collaborative network as a result of our Community Hubs project meeting in April, where we've got the health authorities, we've got Rafe coming and the Deputy Director of Public Health, and we're getting some national organisations in like Trees for Cities, Piney Forest, Edible London, so that we can talk in that collaborative network about how we can go forward on that, particularly in the East. And that's something that you might be interested in, Matt, and I'll tell you about that later, because I think you'd find that meeting particularly good to be involved in. Okay, anything else on the green space? Because I think that is a really big issue. And I know in the east of Enfield, they're really concerned about that, where there is a lack of green space. And we really need to do something about that. Okay, the last issue, Aurora, did you want to say something on that?
Yes, please. I wanted to say that the area where I live, which is in the Bowes ward, is really very, very depleted of vegetation. And I was wondering if there are any plans to improve, for instance, vegetation in the streets, such as trees, to improve, you know, there is very little, there's a little park which is not accessible to everyone, called Tottenhall Recreation. It's not so little, but it's very miserable, and whether there are any plans to improve that area, because we are really suffering here from not having trees in the main street. In the summer is very, very difficult. The traffic is very heavy. And I was just wondering if there are any plans to improve the greenery situation.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, Rafe? Because we'll have to end them because it's
going to be a quick answer. I don't know enough about that. I think there is a general street trees push that we have as a council, but I'm sorry. I mean, do send me something, and I can put you in touch with the Parks and Open Spaces team. But you might find that there is also I don't know, but there is maybe a community group of friends of that parks group, or if there isn't, maybe there could be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's leave it there because we've come to the end of that section. The one part we haven't talked about is community hubs and carrying on the engagement. We're working on that, and Jerry, who's on here from the co-op, I know, is very much interested in that. And another network we're talking through, a local motion, is very interested in that as well. So we're going to try and develop community hubs, and that may be a way of carrying on the conversations that we're having today, and that we don't have enough time to deal with. And we're looking at having one in the Fox and Palmer's Green. We're looking at having one in Eastern Enfield and up in Cockfosters as well to begin with. So those are in the planning, but they're only in the early stages at the moment. So I'm hoping we can really develop a really ongoing method of engagement, which will be really good.